Welcome to The Thriving Mama, the podcast that teaches you not just how to survive, but to thrive in motherhood. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Davis. Welcome to the second part of our diagnoses, labels, and excuses preventing you from healing. In part one, last week, we discussed how diagnoses and labels and excuses prevent us from healing and being functional members of society, and how that, we touched on how it might affect our kids. We also talked about what you need to do instead, or I should say what you need instead of a label or diagnosis, and becoming aware and identifying these patterns in yourself. So today, the focus is going to be on how this is affecting our lives today, not just as mothers, but also how we show up in the world, but also how it's affecting our kids. What are we modeling to our kids? What skills and coping mechanisms and resilience are we giving to our kids or not giving to our kids if we're not doing these, taking responsibility and, stepping up and, making hard choices. So in this episode, we're going to conclude this, journey that we've been on in the last 2 weeks. And we're going to be discussing three things. We're going to be discussing what messages are sent to our kids when we don't take responsibility for our lives as parents. We're going to talk about how taking responsibility makes us stronger and develops resilience. And we're also going to finish with 6 ways we can start, taking that responsibility and improve our health, not just for ourselves, but this is also going to impact our children currently and future generations. If you're confused about where to start addressing your own health, or you've tried all of the things and nothing has worked, I offer podcast listeners a free global health check in which I will evaluate your physical, mental, and emotional health and provide useful resources to help you on your journey. You'll find that link in the show notes. So again, like I said last week, we were, talking about making excuses and, how it was ingrained. It's kind of ingrained at us from an evolutionary standpoint to go towards, comfort and liking, the positives and go away from pain and discomfort. And, just how this has gotten us to the place where, these labels and diagnoses and, just looking for the groups of us versus them has gotten us into trouble. We talked a lot about that, and I gave you a challenge, and the challenge was to, it was to look for your triggers, look for your labels. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in this episode too. But I'm hoping that if you did listen to that episode, you did identify your triggers and start working on those, because they are a big part of the healing journey and a way to start looking at doing the inner work and start in a very meaningful way, looking at yourself and seeing how you can change. And so this episode, we're going to be focusing more on, like I said before, how, all of those, labels and diagnoses and excuses are affecting us as moms, as people in society, and our kids, and also future generations. It's a big thing. This is all what's been swirling around in my head for the last 2, maybe 3 weeks. I kind of have been taking notes as I think about this and making an outline for these episodes, because like I said before, I don't want people to be offended or think that I'm discounting any of our lived experiences, because I'm not. What I am trying to do is make light of the issues that societally we need to address. Like I had mentioned this before, I felt like the pandemic was kind of a crescendo to things that have been happening generationally for decades upon decades, if not even centuries. But I can speak to the lived experience of those of us who are, currently, I would especially say, millennials and Gen X's, and even seeing what I can observe of the baby boomers and, the great generation are our great grandparents who were in the war, or in some cases that would be your great grandparents if you are a Gen Z. But it's like, we've got all of these, 5 generations right now, even more than that, because, my kids I think they are Generation Alpha. We've got potentially 6 generations right now, or, groups of people who are experiencing different, lived experiences. And it's affecting all of us. And it's like, how do we deal with this? How do we come together and think about this from a compassionate and logical manner to get society moving forward and progressing as a species and a people? It's not limited to the United States where these issues are happening. I have friends in Canada, I have friends in Europe who we talk about all of this. And it's obviously a little bit different. It's nuanced in different places, but by and large, we are a world of anxious, unhappy, alone people. And we need to change this. And the change, it starts with us. I will say what I think the primary issue is, we have generations of parents who haven't dealt with their own stuff, and we're passing this on to our kids. Like, that is the number one thing. We have, I can see in my own family, my parents and my grandparents, and even, just people like within my generation, that would be like my cousins, I'd see my aunts and uncles and, my cousins. It's like, I can see the patterns, and I see the patterns in my friends. When I talk to my friends, we talk about this stuff. When I see it with my patients, when we talk about their family dynamics and, family situations. So again, I say the main issue of is generations of parents who haven't dealt with their own stuff, and we're passing this on to our kids. And we need to change this because, like I said, functionally in society, we are not showing up. We're basically hiding and running away. We're hiding from challenges and adversity, and we're running away from it instead of handling it and dealing with it. And I know we've talked about this, in the last episode, and we're going to talk about it today, is that actually is reflected in your DNA and your biochemistry. So from that, you've got that aspect. We've talked before about trauma it changes your DNA. It changes the way your DNA is expressed, and that is passed on. And then that sets the stage for the next generation. These are things we can change. And I would say we owe it to our children and our children's children, all the future generations, to do this and make this change. It's hard. I know it's hard because I've been on this journey for a long time. And I don't expect anyone to be able to do it overnight. I said in the last episode, it's a journey, and there's power in the process. We learn and we gain so much experience and tools from the process. So instead of having the very westernized and very American mindset of a quick fix or a pill or a cleanse, that's another thing. Oh, can I do this 21-day cleanse to fix my health? No, you cannot. It might get the ball rolling, but it is not going to change your life dramatically overnight. There's a lot more to this. We need to understand that all of this, it's progress. It's taking, one foot in front of the other every single day. And, it is progress over perfection. It sounds cliche, but it's so true. It's progress over perfection. None of us are perfect. We're never going to be perfect, but each day we can strive to show up as better versions of ourselves, not just for ourselves, which I think is super important to do it for yourself, but also for your kids. So the first point I wanted to talk about was what messages are being sent to our kids when we don't take responsibility for our lives as parents. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I can think of instances where this was modeled to me. And I can also think of instances where that in my younger adulthood affected me. I didn't take responsibility for, or I ran away from certain challenges. And so that's something I want you to think about. I mean, there's one that I can think of is I was in a relationship. I had a boyfriend, and it was, I was in over my head, so to speak. At the beginning, I was in college when this happened. At the beginning, it was something I thought I needed and I wanted. Then I quickly found out that it was not something I needed and I wanted. And I stayed in that relationship and kind of went through the motions for a while because there was close, relationships that if I broke up with this person was gonna, in my young brain, my, early, I think I was 21-year-old brain, thought it was going to cause World War III in my family and social circles. And so like I said, I stayed in it. And then when I wanted to break up with this person, I didn't do it in the best way. I ran away for I didn't run away. I shouldn't say I didn't run away. I didn't run away, but I avoided my family for an entire day. I was supposed to be at a family gathering and I didn't show up. And of course, my parents freaked out and there was a lot of people searching for me. And then when I eventually did show up, I was a wreck. I was a train wreck and I was crying and I was a mess. I couldn't even talk. I couldn't breathe. It was because I didn't know I was never modeled. I was never modeled how to address conflict in a relationship. I also didn't have the trust in myself to do it, I guess, the right way. And I was afraid I was going to let people down. And then there's also that hurting somebody piece. And that's, they talk about that in ghosting, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But yeah, all those things are very real. But what it comes down to is I was never taught how to address conflict. I was never, modeled great communications, between people who, quote unquote, love each other, or people who are in a respectful and caring relationship. I was never taught that type of stuff. It was either everything's fine or everything's a mess. And nobody discharged their negative, their feelings, or had very good coping mechanisms for when things got ugly. And so I didn't know what to do. So I just sat there. I was sitting on the bank of a river and I was just crying because I didn't know what to do, because I knew I didn't want to be in that relationship anymore, but I didn't know how to address it. So it's really interesting. I look back on that, and obviously it was a learning experience because I knew I never wanted to do that again. And it was the first step in a journey of learning about myself and learning that we do have to have tough conversations and face the music and, face adversity. And so that was a big thing for me in my life. And so it taught me I needed to face things head on. And I'll say this, in my 20s, I still had some difficulty with it. But by the time, I shouldn't even say 20s, by the time I was in my late 20s, I'd had a pretty good handle on it, because that ended up reflecting. I think some of y'all know that I was married when I was younger. I married what would have been kind of the person that I started dating after this situation. I should say this is the second person I dated after the situation I just described. I married him because I thought that he was the one. And he was the college sweetheart and all of those things, but he was not. Now, when I look back on it, and even as we dissolved the marriage, he had so much trauma he hadn't dealt with. And I tried to get him to deal with it and he wouldn't. We had the tough conversations. And I will tell you, that was one of the most difficult experiences of my life, because I really loved and cared about this person. And I asked him one day, basically what made us get the divorce was I asked him, I was like, are you willing to change? Like, are you willing to address your stuff, address the trauma? He also was like I find in some of the corporate ladder people that I work with, corporate ladder climbers or entrepreneurs, they're chasing the proverbial carrot. And when they get it, it doesn't fulfill them. And I straight out point blank asked him because he always put his job and I'd say social aspects of his job too ahead of me. And I said, are you ever going to change that? And I said, can you change that? Are you willing to change that? And he said, no. And I, in that moment, chose myself. And it was hard because I knew I was never going to find the love I thought I deserved. And I was going to not ever find the fulfillment because I was following him around as he chased his dream. And I was never going to get to do that for myself. And so, yeah, that was hard. It was hard because he's a great person. He's a very kind and I'd say generally considerate person, but wasn't willing to deal with his stuff or, instead of it being him and then me below, us being side by side, 1 and 2 together, I shouldn't say 1 and 2, I should say 1A and 1B together. And that was really, really hard. And I grieved that and I grieved that situation, even though again, I knew I didn't want to be there. I shouldn't say I didn't want to be there. I knew it wasn't right for me because I stayed longer than I probably should have. It just took me it took me a couple of years to get the balls to, say this is where we can't do this anymore. And I'll also say we did go to counseling together and even the counselor, the marriage counselor couldn't get him to kind of accept these things that he needed to work on. And do the trauma work. And I'm not going to get into what he needed to work on because obviously that it's personal to him and I want to respect that. But yeah, he wasn't willing to do the work and he literally chose himself over me. And I was like, okay, just see you later. Again, another experience that taught me I can do hard things. But we're not teaching that to our kids. We're just right now, we're in a state, we're teaching our kids to, run away and, not take accountability. So that's something that we need to address. And it's coming it's acutely aware. I'm acutely aware of this issue because of a lot of the things I see posted on social media, like in school pages, like particular school, for my children's school and local, like city pages that I'm on. And then also just groups, like certain like mom groups or other groups I'm associated with. Really interesting how we are trying to shield our kids from life. That's straight up what it is. I'll give you guys an example. We live here in Colorado. It snows. It is pretty temperate, the climate. I grew up in Florida. I have lived in Minnesota and Wisconsin, so I've experienced the extremes. I know what it's like to be really hot and sweaty and humid all the time. And I know what it's like to be really freezing cold and have a long, dark winter and be driving on icy, snowy roads for 6 months. Those are both very real realities. In Colorado, it's really not that bad, but we have a lot of people who are moving here from places that are warm and they want to take their warm climate mindset and bring it here. And you really can't. The example that I'm thinking of is there was a mom who was really upset because her kids had to wait outside in the 27-degree weather and it was really cold. I mean, she thought it was really cold. And she's like, the school needs to do something about this. And, this is not right. And that's a theme we hear all the time here. We need to shut down the world because it snowed or because it got a little cold. No, we don't. Minnesota, Wisconsin, they're laughing at us. North Dakota, South Dakota, all of those really far northern states in the US and Canada, they're all laughing at us because that's soft. I mean, straight up, it's soft. And the mom was saying, oh, we've got to change something. No, we don't. 27 degrees is fine. bothers me to no end that 26 degrees is the threshold for my kids' school, that they're like, oh, they can't go outside and play because the feels like temperature is 26 degrees. You know what? That's bogus. Go look at the northern states. There are kids waiting for the school bus for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes in 0 degrees. Like, that is just us being soft. And that particular thread I saw, it was long. There was a whole section of parents who are kind of saying what I'm saying and being like, step up, make your kids wear appropriate clothing. You can wear leggings, they can wear pants, they can wear, there's a lot of diversity in the options that our kids have to wear for school because our kids go to a school that has uniforms. There's lots of options. Put on jackets, put on scarves, put on hats. You can even have a balaclava and have your face largely covered. Gloves, appropriate socks and footwear. It is very, very, very doable to do that. But this mom really wasn't having it. She wanted the school to change the rules for her kid. And that sets the precedent. It's like mom and dad stepping in to save the kid. You know what? Put the kid out in the cold weather. They will develop a little bit of character and grit from it. It's not like we're not asking you to put your kid out in like sub-zero temperatures or even single digits. I will say this, like 27, the 20s are not even that bad. It starts to get cold, feel pretty cold around, I think, 15. And obviously this is relative. This is my experience, but I've lived all over the place and I know what real cold is. You know what? If it was really windy out there, yeah, get the kids inside because the wind chill is going to make a difference. If it was snowy and blizzarding, which again, they shut everything down here for that. So it's not really a thing, but yeah, my kids were actually out the other day playing in single digits and like blowing snow sideways. We need to teach our children that there's discomfort in the world. It happens every single day of your life. Maybe not every single day, but there are going to be things you don't like. You're going to have to face them. The weather is an example. When I worked at the University of Minnesota Medical School as a microbiologist, the professor I worked for, she was the PI or primary investigator of the study that I was a part of, but she also was a microbiology professor, not just for undergrads, but also for medical students. And even back then, so this was probably 2003 or 2004. Parents, that's when I feel like the tide turned, things shifted, and parents were calling in and being like, oh, Johnny didn't get an A and he really needs an A to get into medical school. So can you change his grade? And I loved the professor I worked for because she was like, no, she was like, Johnny didn't earn an A, so Johnny's not getting an A. So the parents would get mad and throw a fit and call the department head or call whoever. And back then, the department heads and, whoever was in charge had the professors back. But what I've seen now, there's a dynamic shift. And this even goes down to like primary schools, like elementary schools, where the power is being taken away from the teachers and it's given to all these complaining parents. So it's teaching our kids that if you don't like something, either complain about it or, don't do it or, try to make it so that you get your own way. Like, you know what? If you did, I agree. I had to have these conversations with people too. If you did not earn it, you're not getting it. So it's like, we need to remind people that we are not entitled to things. We are not entitled because we exist. We need to earn things in life. We need to respect people. And I'm not saying that there's a lot of institutions I'm speaking to the United States because that's where I live. There are a lot of institutions that do things wrong. And if that's the case, we need to change it. And there are some wrong and straight up stupid rules sometimes in places. Those things need to be changed. And if it's something that that does not make sense and it's not supporting us or serving us, yes, change it. But something like a grade or it being 27 degrees and your kid might be a little chilly, you know what? That's a learning experience, but also you be the parent. You make your kid put on the clothes, and if your kid can't put on the clothes because of a sensory issue, again, it's an opportunity, address those sensory issues, work with this, and work with the school. But like the rules of the school shouldn't change because of one kid. That's kind of what I'm saying. Like we're trying to change society because we haven't taught our kids how to deal with things. So that brings up the next point. What are we doing? What are we teaching our kids? When we don't show up as like responsible adults and take responsibility for our actions and us not feeling well, the healing process. Like I, in my practice, work with a lot of moms and kids. And you've heard me say in like the very first episode, one of the reasons I started doing this specific work was because I would see mom put all of the effort and all of her energy into healing her kids and not herself. And it's sad and it's frustrating. And I would say the more I do this work, it makes me feel those things even more deeply because of not just how moms get stuck in that like hamster wheel or like that, freeze moment where we're moving a lot and we're wasting energy and we're not moving forward and making progress. But it's sad for her, but it's also sad for the kids because you're putting all of the energy into your kids and then saying simultaneously modeling the fact that you don't think you're important enough for this. You don't think you deserve it. You're also not willing to take responsibility or make the hard choices. That's what this ends up becoming. So we're teaching our kids these things. That's what we're modeling. And obviously it's not working because, generation after generation of children being born they don't have the tools and they aren't saying, hey, I'm important. I deserve to be healthy. I deserve to be happy. I deserve to not be anxious. So that is what we're teaching our kids when we don't show up and, say, I'm kind of rejecting this label or rejecting this diagnosis because like I said in the previous episode, I don't think of myself as a person with Hashimoto's that has Lyme and Epstein-Barr virus. No, I don't. I straight up don't. I think of myself as many, many, many other things. Those are things that I have experienced or things that I once had, but that is not who I am. And that's what I want for all of the moms that I work with. But I also want their kids to see that their moms are willing to do hard things and make hard choices and have conversations about it. That is how we do this. It's like, I use ghosting as an example because like I said in the previous episode, that was one of the things like they were trying to like normalize ghosting. Straight up, there's no excuse for ghosting. That what ghosting is a failure to know how to communicate. It's a failure to know how to resolve conflict. It's a failure to want to address adversity. And that's not okay. Like we need to change these things. And one of the ways we can change this is by doing these things ourselves, showing up, doing the hard things, communicating, resolving conflict, hitting adversity head on. These are ways we can show our kids and change the trajectory for them. Our kids currently are Generation Alpha. We can change it. That's happened over time. Like there are shifts in generations. This is a change that needs to happen for our kids. For the people who are existing out there right now that are suffering because they are anxious, because they feel alone, because they're isolated, because they don't feel like they have the skills to deal with everyday life. That's a whole other thing. And that, it's a topic for another day, but it is also like helping them, meeting them where they're at with these symptoms and helping them with the mindset and giving them tools and also addressing the trauma and the emotions and all of that stuff. So that's, how we help those folks. But for our kids, we need to help them, develop skills. We need to help them develop character and have a little bit of grit and resilience. Like this is something that, and I know again, this episode, just like the other episodes, probably going to trigger people. And I invite you to view that trigger. If you're triggered by anything that I'm saying, why is that triggering you? Sit with that. Like, is it something that you're not doing in your life that you wish you were doing? Because I'll tell you, when I am triggered by something, it's usually a reflection of something I know I need to change and I'm not doing it. So there's that. So I'm inviting you again to sit with anything that's triggering you. We need to address these things. There's no other thing, straight up, societally, we need to address this stuff head on. So I wanted to talk about next how taking responsibility makes us stronger and more resilient, because obviously we know what the problem is. How do we overcome it? So, or the why, why is it, why does it make us resilient more and stronger? Overcoming adversity does make us stronger, develop resilience, trust in ourselves, trust in the world, gives us a knowing that we can do hard things because it changes us. When we step up and face those hard things and go after the pain and go after the discomfort, it changes your brain. It changes your brain structure. It changes your brain chemistry. And it changes your genetic expression. So that in and of itself is going to help future generations, but it's also going to help you in the moment. It's going to help you, like I said, when you're changing that biochemistry, it gives you, that inner knowing and that trust. And that happens, like I said, on a brain structure and a biochemical level. And the more you do it, this expands and compounds on itself. So that in and of itself is huge. It's huge because that helps you keep, developing and growing and changing your mindset and changing your beliefs. I'm not going to get into the exact biochemistry of it right now, because that is a, that could be a, subject in and of itself. But yeah, I mean, these things are very real. I've talked a little bit. I'll give you a little bit of it. Oxytocin. One of the things that we do when this is happening, when we have that connection, when we feel love and we feel gratitude and we feel, connected to our friends and family, oxytocin increases, and that increases your neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity does so many things in your body, but it allows you to learn, and it allows you to store memories, and it helps you to change that genetic expression. So that's a huge piece of this puzzle. And so many positive things, but one of the big things is it does boost oxytocin. It also changes your neurons and the connections to neurons and some of the neurotransmitters that are being produced. So for those of you who like to dive into that stuff, feel free to ask about it. And maybe I will do, a future episode on it. But yeah, I mean, that's literally what's happening on a physical level, but also it changes our mindset and it changes your beliefs. And like I said, it allows you to have that trust in yourself and the world, and then knowing that you can do hard things, and it makes it easier to do them in the future. It gives us tools. You learn through each one of these experiences. You can teach that to your children and model it to your children. It gives us teachable experiences. I know that word is used a lot, but that's really huge and impactful. I'm going to use an example of my son. When he was 4 years old, we put him in soccer because my husband and I had been athletes our whole lives, and we wanted him to be one too, but he wasn't interested in it. We still signed him up anyways. We put him out there, and every single time he was on the field, he cried or he wouldn't engage. And it was a very, very bad experience. There was a playground next to where we were at. He always wanted to go to the playground. It was just bad. So inevitably the coach would pull him out and give him to us and just be like, here. A couple of times we actually had to go out onto the field and get him because he was just laying on the field. So that was a really, really bad experience, but we did not quit. That is one big, really, really important thing to say. We didn't quit. We showed up. It wasn't a good experience, but we didn't quit. But we didn't sign him up for soccer again. Actually, we didn't sign him up for sports until he showed interest in them, which was good because it was a decision he was making on his own. And he actually tried several sports and didn't love them, but we kind of made him go through, till the end of, whatever that season was. And so he actually ended up really loving soccer because of one of his best friends. But that was until he hit football this year. I think some of you have heard me talk about him playing soccer and football at the same time this year. And he realized that his the passion was with football and soccer he didn't love anymore. And I know we've talked a lot about the football soccer thing and how crazy it was, but his football ended with 3 soccer games to go and he wanted to quit. He's like, I don't want to do this. This sucks. He would cry and throw tantrums and just didn't want to do it. And I was like, buddy, you made a commitment to this team and you're going to see it through. You're not quitting, mid-season because you don't want to do it anymore. That's not an option here. And so by and large, he went to the practices. Once he got to the practices, he was fine because he loves playing sports. And then he would hem and haw and complain about the games, didn't want to go to the games, but I made it. He got to the games and he was fine. And it was great when he was there. Then he would come to the car afterwards and just be like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, fine. I'm like, yes, when the season's over, we don't have to do it anymore, but you're going to show up. And it was teaching him that you can't commit yourself to something and then just blow it off because you don't feel like it anymore. We were, is instilling in him also a work ethic, keeping your word. There were challenges sometimes, he didn't like the position he was playing too. I encouraged him to talk to the coach about it. So, taking steps to, having those difficult conversations and knowing that it's possible to change things. It's there's so many things that we can teach our kids when we teach them to face adversity themselves, but also when we model it for ourselves. For me, I think y'all know my story about the working out and that my son calling me out on, mommy, you always start these workout programs, but then you don't finish them. Yeah. There was a lot of emotional stuff behind that and self-worth stuff behind that. But then I did it. And I showed up and I just kept on doing it and that momentum built on itself. And I showed my kids that, yeah, there are hard things to do. The other thing, I was also doing the, inner work too, which made it, made all of those little wins, compounded, right? Because I was showing up and doing the hard work. And now when I stop working out, if I'm not feeling well for a week, I can start working out again. It's I don't stop working out for months or a year. So it really does change who you are and it changes your identity. And that's the key to all of this is that the mindset, beliefs, and identity shifts. Because if you stay in that limited identity, you aren't going to progress forward. And then the last, the last things I want to leave you with are the 6 simple ways we can start taking responsibility to improve our health and step away from the limiting labels of the diagnosis and also just stop making excuses. First thing is the context. Allow a label or a diagnosis to be context and give you context about your situation without it becoming who you are. That's a big piece of it. That's number 1. Number 2, like I said, identify your triggers, because when you identify your triggers, you can start doing the inner work to move forward. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. 3 is admitting when you're wrong. I know that's so hard because again, we weren't really modeled it, but when you do it more often, it makes it easier. So I will admit when I'm wrong to mostly it's the people I'm around all the time. So it's going to be my family. It's going to be my kids, my husband, but, patience. I mean, sometimes I'll say like, maybe I was wrong. Like I had the incorrect thinking about this or, like friends in my life, sometimes I am willing to admit when I'm wrong about something. That's a big piece of it. Admitting you're wrong is taking responsibility. That's something we are missing right now. Communication is number 4. Communicating your feelings and needs. Remember how at the beginning of this episode, I said, one of the main issues, is the generations of parents who haven't dealt with their own stuff. It's, literally owning your stuff, owning it and communicating it. It could look as something like this, it could be like saying to your kids, like, or your spouse, like, I feel this way. I feel anxious or I feel, I will use anxious because so many people are anxious and have anxiety. So I'm feeling anxious and I don't know what to do about it. It could be as simple as that. Can you help me? Can you help me find ways to deal with this? It could be that simple, but it's communicating your feelings and your needs. And again, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. It's again, like riding a bike. It's, that's something that with certain people in my life, I had a really difficult time doing up until very recently, communicating my feelings and my needs. And that's part of that is setting boundaries too. But I admittedly struggle. I did it really, really well in like 90% of my life, but there was that 10% and that was a outstanding, like very distinct 10% of people that I would kind of tiptoe my feelings around, certain subjects, but I don't do that anymore. I show up as myself, but that has been a very recent development. Like it's, so much of this process of self-growth and, dealing with your emotions and your trauma is becoming authentically who you are. And that is, doing these hard things, stepping into the difficult zone. And a big thing is communicating your feelings and needs. So that, and modeling it to your kids and teaching them, having discussions about this. When you see something happening or like when you got frustrated and yelled at your kids, A, apologize, B, say, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to respond to you that way. This is what I should have done. If you're ever in this situation in the future, this is how to deal with it. It's so easy once you start doing that. And if you don't know how to do it, find resources, start with a book, look at, programs, work with a person, work with a coach, talk to your friends. There's so many ways you can get the ball rolling to get this stuff moving in the right direction. Number 5 is viewing conflict as opportunity. That is what I do in my everyday life because I'm a mom. I am a clinician and business owner. I just live life. There are conflicts and disappointments every single day. But instead of letting them pile up and get me down, I view it as an opportunity. It's like, is it an opportunity? It can be an opportunity for growth. It can be an opportunity for change. It could be an opportunity to learn. And sometimes that just comes with maturity and experience. And sometimes there's surrender to a situation that you can't change. You might not be able to change it, but you can change how you view it. And when you do that, the world opens up. And then the last one, number 6, is taking accountability and responsibility for your choices and taking action. Like, we all know what we need to do most of the time. And it's like that whole thing we've been talking about this whole time. Do you make the hard choice and go after the hard things, like whether it's changing your diet or addressing a trauma or getting out of a relationship that doesn't serve you or, putting up hard boundaries? again, in a relationship that's not serving you or in a situation that's not serving you, making those hard choices and then walking through the outcome and experiencing it for yourself, but also modeling it and explaining it to your kids. I explain everything to my kids at an age appropriate level. I don't shield them from anything. And I would say I've seen some parents shield their kids from everything in the world. And they're like, oh, I just want my kids to be kids. Yes, I want my kids to be kids too. But if they are witnessing something or if they hear about something, I don't say, we're not talking about it. We talk about it. So, and I am all for kids being kids and, maintaining their innocence as long as possible. But unfortunately, in the world we live in now, it's you talking about it or them finding out about it from their friends or social media or something else. So I would encourage you to have, make the hard choice, have the difficult conversation, but make it age appropriate and in terms that your kids understand. But again, like taking accountability and responsibility for your choices and your actions. That's probably one of the most important ones to do, because then you're showing your kids that you're taking ownership of your life. And that's what you're showing them that they can do too. So I said I was going to end these episodes with a call to action for you. So we're going to build a little bit on the previous one of identifying the triggers and, why those might be. So I want you to keep identifying the triggers, but also write out the labels and the diagnoses and the challenges that you're facing, all of the things. And see if you, when you look at it and you think about it, or do you feel like you're identifying with it? If you are, it's something internally needs to change. You need to change your identity. And so it's giving you a base of something to work with. I want you to write down the ways that you might start the process of addressing these things and overcoming these things. And if you are feeling up to it, share that experience with your kids or a friend or somebody else, because when you do that, you make it very real and it puts it out there. You're putting it out there for the, world to hear. And that also gives you a level of accountability, also support, which is really important. That's like a lot that we talk about when I'm working with people and we're in the group format. That accountability and support are so huge in being able to, achieve what we want to achieve and, be who we deserve to be. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with that I've left you with before, but I so firmly believe you can do hard things.
If you made it this far, I truly appreciate you. Remember, knowledge is just the beginning. Taking action is what truly sparks change. If you're overwhelmed and don't have enough energy to make it through the day, I invite you to book a free 20-minute coaching call with me. It's a no-obligation chat where we can discuss your health goals and how I might be able to help you achieve them. Visit the link in the episode description to book that call. Until next time, keep striving for wellness and remember, you have the power to not just survive, but thrive in motherhood.